tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
But these numbers are misleading. They're alarming in a way that is unhelpful to the conversation.
$5 billion blowback. Why VPD claims around social safety net spending is attracting controversy. And final arguments in former Surrey Mayor Doug McCallum's mischief trial and what happens next.
Even now, when people message me commenting on my pictures, commenting on the videos, they say, I can look at this for hours because it makes me so calm.
Plus, why a Vancouver photographer is getting up close and personal with polar bears.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. There's heavy criticism tonight aimed at the Vancouver Police Department. It's over a report it has released claiming the city spends billions of dollars focusing on services for vulnerable communities. But as Joel Ballard reports, critics say the numbers are misleading and suggest the department is veering into politics.
The report begins with a big number, $5 billion. That's what the Vancouver Police Department says is spent on social services in neighborhoods like the downtown east side.
Despite more money than ever, more time, more resources, and more energy in the overarching system, it's clear that something isn't working.
The report was commissioned by the VPD and authored by Alberta data and analytics firm Help Seeker Technologies. It focuses on hot-button issues like homelessness and drug addiction. But a chorus of critics say the $5 billion figure isn't accurate.
The numbers are incredibly misleading, and that's the wrong way to start a really important conversation.
The report cites $5 billion is spent on what it calls a social safety net every year. But $2 billion of that is direct government transfers, funding like pensions, employment insurance, and child benefits. It also includes the Vancouver Police operating budget and Vancouver Fire and Rescue Services, funding that isn't specific to the downtown east side.
I think there are valid concerns about the way the report seems to seek to villainize those serving on the front lines, those trying to keep people healthy and alive in this crisis.
Equally thrown off by the $5 billion sum was the city's new mayor.
After we went through the report, it prompted more questions than answers. I don't think it's very useful. We had a hard time sourcing the numbers.
Chief Palmer says the report highlights a gap in oversight and transparency.
I don't want to lose sight of the big picture here is that the lack of coordination and the piecemeal approach that we've taken to dealing with social services in this city.
The report costs almost $150,000 to produce. Help Seekers says it is phase one and lacks much needed data due to limited reporting from agencies. A second phase would further determine what money is being spent where.
It's not factual at all.
This drug policy advocate is among those asking why the VPD, an independent agency, commissioned the report at all.
They're not healthcare workers. They're not social workers. They're not politicians. We have a government. We have a city government, a provincial government. They're the ones we want to solve the problems.
Chief Palmer, meanwhile, has proposed the creation of a centralized body to oversee and coordinate services. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
The province's public safety minister, meanwhile, is responding to that report, writing, services are strengthened and coordinated by having informed discussions with community partners on the ground, not by spreading sensationalized and misleading numbers. We'll have more analysis on this story coming up later in the show. Well, it was among the most horrifying images from last November's devastating floods. A remote BC highway all but wiped out. The only pictures were taken by helicopter. Highway 8 links Merritt with Spence's Bridge, and while remote, it's an important link for the communities and First Nations that live along the route. Many were cut off from services and supplies. Now, almost a year later, the road has been largely fixed. The CBC's Tom Popick was there to see the resurrection of Highway 8.
We're out. Striking down a temporary stoplight, workers on Highway 8 aren't finished their work here, but almost a year after flood devastation, traffic is now rolling through. For the provincial government, it's an event worth celebrating.
So we have restored connectivity to residents, Indigenous communities. Local industry will benefit to get materials and workers to and from their places of employment. It is a very important milestone for our province.
The region's First Nations say this is all more than welcome news.
It is more than a road to us. It is connection. It is spirit. It is a main artery within our nation. Recovery is all-encompassing. Transportation is one component. Displacement, you are gone from your home, your family, everything.
The loss was visceral for the Cook Ferry Indian Band. Cook Beeman-Barrett's video of Highway 8 dissolving from the force of the Nicola River's torrent was just the start.
As of today, Chief and Council have declared a local state of emergency. 5
First Nations up and down the watershed lost roads, power, communications, and homes. Essential food and fuels had to be flown in. While rebuilding started quickly, the devastation here was widespread. 5 landslides, some 7 kilometers of highway washed away in a single stretch. Band members were forced to detour more than 2 hours to get to Merritt. Temporary bridges have now been built. More than 25 sections of highway rest on resilient roadbed designed to withstand future climate change disasters. But much of the road still has to be paved, bridges expanded, and safety barriers erected. The cost so far tops $100 million, some 40% of the $250 million spent so far on post-flood highway reconstruction. But it's projects being done in cooperation with First Nations. 30% of construction crews are Indigenous. They say the work here is not over, either on the highway or on reconciliation.
Now more than ever, there's a signal to ministries to rid yourselves of the silos you work in and come collectively, as us as chiefs have to do every day, to work through these devastations, traumas.
For First Nations, for the moment, this road connecting communities is seen as a start. The first steps, they hope, to true partnership. Tom Popick, CBC News near Spence's Bridge.
Homicide investigators are looking into 2 deaths in a Chilliwack home that appear to be suspicious. RCMP were called to the rural house near the corner of South Sumas Road and Unsworth Road yesterday just before 2 p.m. A man and a woman were found dead. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team has taken over the case. Police can't confirm the cause of the death, but say there appears to be no threat to the public.
We are investigating to see if this has to do with the drug trade. At this time, we have no information that would suggest that it has anything to do with the Lower Mainland gang conflict, although we'll continue to work with our partners at CFSEU to collect any information that could lead to that.
Anyone with information is asked to call police. To New Westminster now, where a pedestrian is dead after being hit by a transit bus. Police say they were called to the area of East 8th Avenue and Chilliwack Street around 7 p.m. for reports of an unresponsive pedestrian who had been hit by a bus. The cause of the collision is still under investigation, and no details about the victim have been released. Well, Crown and defense are painting 2 very different pictures in closing arguments at the public mischief trial for former Surrey Mayor Doug McCallum. He says his foot was run over in a Save-On-Foods parking lot. And as Michelle Gussoub tells us, the case could come down to discrepancies in the information McCallum gave to police in his original interview.
Over the past week and a half, Crown and defense presented 2 very different versions of what exactly happened in the Save-On-Foods parking lot that day. And today we heard final arguments in Doug McCallum's public mischief trial. McCallum's defense argued there's no evidence his foot wasn't run over by Debbie Johnstone after their verbal altercation. They said he acted reasonably in the aftermath, calling 911 and providing police with all the evidence they asked for. And they argued any discrepancies in McCallum's description of what exactly happened can be explained away because he was in shock. But over several hours today, Crown presented a very different version of what happened on that day in September, arguing that even if Johnstone did run over his foot, McCallum still intentionally exploited what would have been an obvious accident to get back at a political foe. Johnstone, after all, was a high-profile member of a group opposed to McCallum's plans for municipal police force. The Crown maintains McCallum attempted to mislead police about what happened to get her in trouble, saying 11 times that he was pinned to his car, when video reveals that wasn't the case. And they argue McCallum would not have been in shock, given that over 4 hours had passed by the time he was making those statements. So were the discrepancies in McCallum's original police interview innocent mistakes and exaggerations from someone who was in shock? Or were they a calculated attempt to get police to investigate a longtime political foe? That's the question that is now in front of a judge, with a decision expected in 2 weeks. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Surrey.
An anti-Asian advocacy group is applauding the decision to sentence 2 people to 12 months probation after a racist incident at a Richmond coffee shop. But they say there's still more that needs to be done.
We welcome Judge Vander's sentence. It sends a message that hate-motivated crime are unacceptable in Canada. It has been a long wait of 19 months. And finally, justice has been served.
The 2 were charged after they spilled or threw coffee and said racist language to an employee at a coffee shop in March of 2021. The judge noted the confrontation escalated when the manager tried to enforce pandemic rules in place at the time. The group has been working to raise awareness about racist hate crimes since the trial began. Well, they came into the NHL together as teenagers. Now, Vancouver Canucks legends Daniel and Henrik Sedin are heading into the Hockey Hall of Fame side by side, but don't expect them to brag.
It's a great honor, but like I said, we never look at ourselves as those types of players that joins the Hall of Fame.
We got a chance to play on the same team, and I think we wanted to make the most out of it, and that's I think what we're proud of.
The Twins headline the class of 2022, which includes Canuck teammate Roberto Luongo. The Sedins were drafted in 1999 and played all 17 seasons of their careers with the Canucks before retiring in 2018. Former captain Henrik remains the team's all-time leader in points, assists, and games played, while Daniel leads the team in goals. The Canucks retired their jerseys 2 years ago. It's been almost 1 year since a windstorm sent a barge barreling into the rocks at English Bay, and it's finally time to say goodbye. According to the City of Vancouver, deconstruction is almost complete, with the hull of the barge expected to be gone by the end of next week. As long as the sunny weather holds, beach cleanup and equipment removal will follow. The view from Sunset Beach, of course, will once again be back to its bargeless state. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. Joe, I never actually went to the barge, I have to say. Wasn't a fan of the barge, but did you get a chance to check it out?
I was going to ask you your thoughts on it. It is one of those questions that, how do you feel about the barge? And I actually made a family trip.
Of course you
did. One snowy day. Yeah, it was our Saturday plan to all head down to the barge, but I feel like I'm good with that. I've got the pictures. I'm fine.
I have to tell you, everyone in my ear is saying, yeah, she did. I knew she did. Of course.
I posted the pictures as well. Okay. Yes. Yeah, well, you mentioned, Anita, the fair weather helping with the final farewell, the adieu to the barge, and that's looking good. I think we will see the bits and bobs head out over the next couple of days, because we're actually into fairly, dare I say, calm weather after a roller coaster ride. Let me start you off with the current temperatures. We have one more night into the deep freeze. 2 at YVR right now. Starting to see sub-zero temperatures as you cross over to Nanaimo. We've got a few more degrees to go tonight, getting down to the minus double digits for all, minus temperatures, I should say, for all of the province. Minus double digits for places like Prince George, are already at minus 17. As far as wind chill, a minus 22 up in the Peace. So that Arctic outflow still very much in place. Cold and clear through the overnight. Here is the next weather maker. This low pressure system going to attempt to push some of that Arctic air out. As it collides with the Arctic air, we do have snowfall warnings in place for inland coastal sections. But look at the afternoon highs as we head into Friday, starting to recover a little bit. And by the time we hit the weekend, we won't quite be at seasonal across the province, but no longer in our record cold temperatures. So Anita, one more cold night, and then we start the slow climb out.
Okay, we can handle it. One more.
Yes, we can.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
There's some suggestion that there are fewer poppies being worn this year, and a possible reason may be that they are simply harder to find. As Vincent Papaquash reports, the hope is that will change.
A quick walk around downtown Vancouver, and it's likely you won't see many poppies. I checked here and here, places that normally carry the iconic emblems. And finally, I checked here, at Robson and Hamilton. This is where I finally found a poppy downtown. So the question is, are there truly fewer poppy boxes out there at local businesses?
But I imagine that most cafes and shops have a tray up by the till.
Well, actually, I haven't seen any poppy sellers. I would have bought one if I'd seen one, yes.
Lonsdale Market, they were selling them, yeah. And I did have one, but I lost it.
This is the way the poppies arrive to us. They're in bundles of 5 like this.
Every year, the Vancouver Poppy Fund orders boxes from the National Legion Command, but they say it's getting harder to find places to set up.
When the branches went out with their poppy trays, they have to get permission before they go. And they've been told if you don't have permission to go, don't go.
30,000 boxes have been sent out across the country, which really isn't a decrease from previous years. So why does it seem like fewer people are wearing poppies now?
We don't have a lot of volunteers this year. It's mostly due to COVID.
Robert Cowley has been volunteering with the Legion for 22 years.
We're always looking for more volunteers, and we have several locations. We're being asked constantly if somebody could come in, stand in front of their location and do it, but unfortunately we just don't have the volunteers for that this year.
And there are other ways people can help.
If you own a business and you have a business you would like a poppy tray, let them know you would like a tray.
While there may be concern with fewer volunteers this year, the hope is things will bounce back next year. Vincent Papaquash, CBC News.
Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre paid a visit to Vancouver this morning and on a rare occasion took questions from the media. The official opposition leader hasn't been taking many questions from reporters since he was elected almost 2 months ago. Poilievre was asked for his assessment of the evidence at the Public Order Emergency Commission into last winter's convoy protests. Poilievre says his position hasn't changed. He supports the law-abiding and peaceful protesters who were there and condemns any individual who behaved badly or broke laws.
I think it's possible to support the overall cause of personal free choice in vaccination and the overall cause of respecting the truckers' ability to earn an income while holding individually responsible anyone who behaved badly, broke laws, or blockaded key infrastructure. That was my position before, during, and now.
The event comes as a hearing continues in Ottawa on the federal government's use of the Emergencies Act to end those convoy protests. Let's get back to our top story now tonight. That new report released by the Vancouver Police Department claiming $5 billion a year is spent on the city's social safety net. That's the social services for the most vulnerable communities. The problem for many is that the report was commissioned by the Vancouver Police Department and without direction or input from City Council or the city's administration. Czech political reporter and Glacier Media political columnist Rob Shaw has been digging into this report and joins me now. Rob, you've had some pretty strong words about this report commissioned by the VPD. The force didn't write it. You say it's fiction and that the timing is suspect as well. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, I call it misleading fiction, and the department did write a summary to the report that was leaked publicly. That's because the $5 billion just doesn't add up. $2 billion of that in supposed social safety net spending is actually things like the Canada Pension Plan, old age security, and child tax benefit for all Vancouverites, not just in the downtown east side. So you have to take that away from the total. And then there's almost $1.5 billion in charities. It is counted up in a very odd way. It includes the Legal Aid Society's spending for the entire province and some sort of aquafit therapy society and even a horse therapy society and the UBC Foundation. So I think you end up with 70% of that $5 billion total that I think is misleading at best, and it creates this distortion of the number that is clearly designed to say we're spending a lot on the downtown east side, but the number doesn't really reflect that. It is a way overswing, I think, in the report.
So what's the story here? I mean, you've been covering politics in this province for a long time. The VPD had to have known that people would have dug into this and uncovered some of this pretty quickly. What do you think is behind it?
Yeah, I've been covering politics for 15 years, and sometimes you get a sense of when reports are leaked just for the right reason. And I think the timing is key right now. We have a new premier, David Eby, who's coming into office. He's promised to crack down on prolific offenders. We have a new Vancouver mayor, Ken Sim, who has a plan to do 100 new police officers to the force. They're both under pressure to get tougher on crime. And a report like this, I think, is designed to try and squeeze more money out of various levels of government for law and order, for the VPD budget, by embarrassing them on what's supposed to be a very large amount spent on a problem that's getting worse. And unfortunately, because the report is so inaccurate and so out of whack, I think really the person and the agency that ends up most embarrassed by this today is Vancouver Police itself.
Yeah, it seems to be that way for sure. You know, we've talked a bunch about how this report is actually commissioned by the VPD. Can you talk about why that's so significant and tell us what you know about the actual authors?
Well, the authors come from Alberta, and they're a sort of social technology change company. It may have something to do with how they misread the situation in Vancouver and relied on things like addresses for Vancouver-based charities that actually provide services across the province. You know, there is a lot of criticism on VPD that no one asked them to do this, and they certainly weren't directed by council. Their argument is, well, we see these things in the front line every day, so we wanted to start a discussion. The problem with it starting a discussion on a completely misleading report is that most people don't want to engage. And if they were looking for the new premier and the new mayor to jump in and start talking about their budget, neither of them wants to touch this report with a 10-foot pole after today. And I don't think VPD is going to get the outcome that they were hoping for from releasing this.
Political reporter Rob Shaw tonight in Victoria. Thank you. In a moment, they packed their bags and left their old lives behind. 50 years later, Ugandan refugees to BC are reflecting on their arrival. We'll share one family's story of survival next. Thanks for joining our commercial-free live stream. The Edmonton Potters Guild has been around since 1952 and was working out of the same well-loved studio until now. The CBC's Nathan Gross went to check out the new location and learn more about what the Guild is all about.
I've been a member of the Potters Guild for 40 years. It's a family. Like I've been friends with these people for so many years. And we bounce ideas off each other, and we have fun together. We're unique in the way that we are run by volunteers. We started out, we were in Vic Comp for many years. We were sort of stuck because we couldn't possibly have more people in there than we did have. And so we were at a place where there was no room for growth.
The space was less than ideal, and yet it fostered many potters over many years. The new space is bigger, it's newer. The people who did end up finding this space were, as soon as they saw it, it was like they could envision the Potters Guild being here. We have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week access. We also have more space for our wheels. We have more wheels. We have a brand new kiln. We have a special kiln room, which we didn't have before. So once the kiln heated up, the entire space, it was like being in a desert. We have a giant space relative to what we did have to do the glazing. The area where most people do hand building, which is not throwing on the wheel, is sunlit on almost all sides. We have a place where people can have a coffee or a lunch.
This is wonderful. Like, it all just fell into place. We've always had a real bunch of people that wanted to join in. Now we have this beautiful space so that we could grow and have more members.
Pottery has become one of those things that a lot of people want to do. It's a passion. It's something that we all enjoy doing because of how it just makes us feel.
their deadline to leave their home country was just 90 days. And 50 years ago, thousands of Ugandans came to Canada as refugees. Among them, the family of one of our journalists here at the CBC. Corey Correa took this anniversary to hear from them as they reflect on their remarkable journey leaving Uganda for a new life here.
Let's start at the beginning. After staging a coup in 1971, military leader Idi Amin became the president of Uganda. The dictator took an extreme approach to African nationalism. He accused Asians of sabotaging the country's economy, and on August 4th, 1972, he announced the country's residents of Asian descent, nearly 80,000 people, had 90 days to leave. These people were second and third generation Ugandans, recruited from countries like India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh by the former British regime to work as laborers, merchants, and civil servants. Under the threat of violence, about 50,000 Asian Ugandans fled for safety by the November 8th deadline, uprooting their families, leaving behind their homes, businesses, money, and belongings, and seeking refuge in whichever country would take them. Canada agreed to accept 4,400 refugees, but took in a couple thousand more. Among them were my grandparents and 5 of their 6 children who were still in Africa. They flew into a Canadian Forces base in Montreal in late October before arriving in Vancouver, their future home. My Uncle Sam, the oldest of the siblings to make the journey, had just turned 19. I wanted to take my uncle around town to awaken some of his earliest memories in the city, to try and get an idea of what my family experienced during their first few months in a strange new world. So Uncle Sam, 50 years later, almost to the date, this was your first point of contact in Vancouver. What are you feeling being back here?
I am really glad that my parents decided to bring us to Canada. It was amazing. The buildings, the architecture, the roads, it was thrilling. Everything was new and exciting.
This is the Mayfair Hotel, or it used to be.
Yes.
Where you guys first came to stay when you came to Canada?
It is.
Does it look the same?
Doesn't look anything like it used to. I've always wanted to come in here for the few times that I've been downtown and I've near this place, but I was afraid the doorman wouldn't let me in.
What was your stay like here?
It was a one-bedroom suite. We were 6 of us, but we made do because that's all we had.
This is the place where you first got a job. No, I mean, not this Whole Foods, but whatever was here before.
Yes, it was a steakhouse. Myself and my brother got a job as dishwashers. It was great. Nobody bothered us, although I never tasted a steak in all the time that I worked here.
Found the old photos from the basement. My grandmother was born in 1931 in western Uganda. After 40 years there, growing up, getting married, working as a secretary, and raising 6 children, she was forced out. These photos were among the few possessions you took?
Yes.
From Uganda when you had to leave?
Yeah. This was in Uganda. That's my mother's home.
Tell me about the expulsion order. Where were you when you heard about it?
I was at work. And then my boss told me to, go home. And the children, of course, came from school. I told them what had happened, that there was going to be trouble. Came at us like a bomb.
My great-uncle Willie found out about the order while he was in Munich, competing in the Olympic Games. He was on the Ugandan field hockey team, preparing to represent the same country that was kicking him out.
We had no time for all this stuff. We left our apartment, our cars, and somebody drove us to the airport. And that stretch of the airport was, I don't know, 6 or 7 stops by the Uganda Army. And they were taking whatever money you had in your pockets, your gold, your silver. They stripped all the Asians of anything valuable they had on them.
We didn't care because we were worried about our lives more than our possessions.
Then how did you guys end up in Canada? I heard that it was your idea.
No, it wasn't my idea. It was my husband. He heard that, Canada was the best place. So that's how we came out here.
Do you think back to Uganda at any point, and does it make you upset thinking that they, kicked 3 generations of your family out of the country?
Not at all. I mean, I think back fondly because during the winters especially, I long for the heat.
Strange that we could just leave something that is yours personally and go and live in a country, come here with nothing and start a new life from scratch. But we did, and we are happy for it.
Reflecting on 50 years in Canada, you raised 6 kids here, 12 grandkids, 8 great-grandkids. What do you think about all that you've built?
I think that is a wonderful thing.
U.S. Republicans may have managed to flip the Senate in yesterday's midterms, but a potential red wave turned into more of a red ripple. I'll take you inside the election and the votes left to be counted next.
They're Japanese tourists, and as Ian Hannamansing tells us, Eaton's and other stores are going all out to make them feel right at home.
A Monday morning staff briefing at Eaton's. The topic today, the Japanese yen.
Also, just for your information, some examples of the yen so that you can recognize it.
Starting this morning, customers can use yen at this store, and a Japanese translation service is a phone call away. All this to try to lure the affluent, expanding Japanese tourist trade to a very traditional Canadian department store.
It's a touch of something familiar to them, and it's a gesture of respect and the fact that we would like them to visit our store.
And it's quite a lucrative market. Japanese visitors spend more per person than any other tourists in Vancouver. $93 a day, $58 million last year.
It's the fastest growing market we have. About 175,000 of them came last year. And although they come for beauty, the fact is that their activity is shopping.
The impact of the Japanese tourist boom on the city is probably most evident on this street, where brand new stores catering almost exclusively to visitors from Japan are quickly filling up the block. This is the OK Gift Store, a favorite stop for a lot of Japanese tourists. Yuko Tsukamoto recently moved to Canada, but her mother is visiting and she's buying some gifts to take back. Tsukamoto says she feels at home at this store.
I can buy goods easily because staff or all staff is Japanese and the staff speak Japanese for me.
The people at Eaton's would like to make Japanese tourists equally comfortable here. They're not sure how long that will take. By late this afternoon, there were 5 sales in yen. Ian Hannamansing, CBC News, Vancouver.
The U.S. midterm election results are still trickling in with no clear verdict in sight. However, President Joe Biden is still appearing to be optimistic today. The CBC's Katie Simpson reports on what this could mean for the next 2 years in Washington, D.C. politics.
The raw energy and the joy in this room are signs of a party that outperformed expectations. Democrat John Fetterman narrowly beat his Republican challenger, Dr. Mehmet Oz, in Pennsylvania's Senate race. His path to victory, largely the same as Democrats up and down the ballot across the country.
A woman's right to choose one. Supreme Court has got to go!
Promises of protecting access to abortion motivated voters, as did fallout from the January 6th attack. Democrats warned of threats to democracy posed by Republicans campaigning on the lie the 2020 election was rigged.
The American people have spoken and proven once again that democracy is who we are.
Get out the vote!
The president is hopeful his party will maintain control of the Senate. And even though it looks as if Republicans will win the House, he's satisfied their margin of victory will be slim.
I'm prepared to work with my Republican colleagues. The American people have made clear, I think, that they expect Republicans to be prepared to work with me as well.
The knives are out for leaders in the Republican House. They predicted a blowout win, given Joe Biden's low approval ratings, inflation, and a surge in crime.
That is a searing indictment of the Republican Party. That is a searing indictment of the message that we have been sending to the voters. They looked at all of that and looked at the Republican alternative and said, no thanks.
If Republicans are looking for someone to point a finger at, Donald Trump isn't interested in taking any responsibility.
Well, I think if they win, I should get all the credit, and if they lose, I should not be blamed at all.
Donald Trump is expected to announce he's running for president next week. His advisors are reportedly urging him to reconsider. But if history is to be any guide, Donald Trump will do what he wants. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
The parent company of Facebook, Meta, is laying off about 11,000 workers, or approximately 13% of its employees. Meta is trying to rein in costs as its advertising revenue falls. The company has been spending tens of billions of dollars trying to develop the metaverse, an online augmented reality universe. Meta posted 2 consecutive quarterly losses this year, and the company and its advertisers are bracing for a recession. There's no word on how many cuts will be made to Canadian operations. In a televised exchange between grim-faced officials, Russia has announced the withdrawal of its forces from Kherson. That would mark a major defeat, a retreat from the capital of a region that Moscow claims as part of Russia. But as David Common explains, some in Ukraine are urging caution.
What's happening here may well symbolize the past 2 months of the war, a Russian tank unaware of a nearby Ukrainian soldier with a weapon. Repeatedly, the Russians have been caught off guard by Ukraine's fall offensive, including here in the key city of Kherson, a major prize for Russia at the start of the war. Ukraine has been steadily advancing on it. Now, a rare public announcement of retreat from the Russian Defense Ministry. Thousands of soldiers said to be moving out, the city abandoned. But Russia's retreat doesn't mean it's leaving the region. Its forces will still be on the other side of the formidable Dnieper River, defending from newly made trenches and mini bunkers like these. But this withdrawal announcement, carefully choreographed and televised, is over land Russia only just last month claimed as its own, prepared to defend by all means, including nuclear. Now Ukrainian troops are flooding it.
The situation for the Russians in Kherson is militarily unsustainable. They've got huge logistic difficulties to bring reinforcements across the Dnieper River. So it's very difficult for the Russians to sustain this with the Ukrainian forces just 20 kilometers away.
There are some, though, who think this retreat is just a Russian ruse.
They
using such the tactic just to mislead us.
The Russians are not ready to leave the city, Ukraine's president said tonight, but we have a strategy. Russia has been clearing the city of civilians, so could possibly be instead hiding now, preparing for an urban fight. One way or the other, it'll be very clear soon. David Coleman, CBC News, Toronto.
American basketball star Brittany Griner is being sent to a Russian penal colony. The announcement came today, just weeks after she was denied an appeal for her conviction on a drug possession and smuggling charges. Earlier this year, Russian authorities arrested her at an airport after finding cannabis oil vapes in her luggage. She's been detained ever since. Now, in penal colonies, prisoners are forced into hard labor and are often abused. Moscow has been accused of using the WNBA star as a political pawn. Well, they're a crucial part of many people's takeout meals, but while they are said to be compostable, plastic-looking knives and plates are often not ready for the bin. We'll explain everything right after the break.
I like things that mean something, and I like to find little treasures and make them into something. Hi, welcome to my home. I'm Liz Bell, and I am an owner of Liz Bell Agency in Vancouver. The location of this home is in Howe Sound, which is apparently the most southerly fjord of the Americas, as they say. The story of this home started, let me think, in about 1986. And I was modeling back in the prehistoric times. We wanted to build a house that was going to fit on this rock without having to cut down any trees or do any blasting of any of the rock. We designed this house on the hill with the turrets and pretty much built the whole thing ourselves. So these beams, as you can see, they go from all the way that side of the house all the way out to there. So it was like the Egyptians. We were like Egyptians getting these into the house, rolled them up from down in the water. We found the wood, most of it, floating around the ocean. Logs that have fallen off booms, and in storms, they come apart and some logs go adrift. So we'd find logs and bring them in and slice them up and just stockpile them. I mean, all these beams and all these windowsills and the flooring and the windows and the stairs are all from the ocean. I'm not a trendy kind of person. I like to just have things that I like. So like this drinks cabinet and those urns up there, this is like the piece de resistance kind of thing, and that of my father's. When you open it, it even smells of my father. And look at it, it's like the liquor cabinet. We call it the drinks cabinet. I always said, you know, my parents, growing up in South Africa, when we'd go on holiday, we'd go to antique shops. We wouldn't go to the beach or Playland or whatever it was. We'd go to antique shops. And so I guess I've got a little bit of that in me as well, you know. So. The fast-paced fashion industry is so great to just leave behind and shed as I drive this highway. What I love about living here is the silence. I mean, just to be able to look out in the view, it just changes. You just switch when you come home. It's very calming. This home is the place where we all congregate. It's the Christmas house and the Easter house, and definitely the place where everyone wants to come. We designed the house so that each window was like a picture frame. You see how they have the wood around them like that? We sit here in front of the fire and play crib and drink wine. It's the best.
Some alarming numbers at the UN Conference on Climate Change today. A coalition of 100 organizations released data indicating that emissions are as much as 3 times higher than what's been reported to the UN. The UN Secretary General expressed concern while also applauding the coalition's work.
Timely and granular data on the sources of the emissions is essential, but we are still lacking a full picture. And many significant sources of emissions are not yet on our radar in real time. And that is where this initiative comes in.
The gathering in Egypt also heard from former U.S. Vice President Al Gore, who called the underreporting of emissions shocking. He says some governments are deliberately underreporting emissions. Gore is one of the founders of the coalition called TRACE. It gathers evidence about emission sources using satellites and remote sensors. Okay, Joe, so all this snow and this talk about the cold weather, I got my Christmas lights put up today.
Oh, wow. Let's mark the calendars. Is that the earliest you've ever done it?
It's the earliest I've done it, but my neighbor actually, I think, did it about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, well, there you go. Just after Halloween, I'm guessing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually tempted to put mine up, but I have family members' birthdays in November, and we have to wait for the birthdays to be over, but I'm glad you did it. I think that with the snow, everyone is in the spirit a little earlier than normal this year, and we're still feeling like winter out there right now. 2 is the current temperature at YVR, -8 as we head out towards Lillooet, a -6 in through Kelowna. This is without the wind chill, and we will feel that through the early morning hours. That's when the wind chill will be at the greatest tomorrow morning. Sort of the last time we'll be in the single digits, I should say, is tomorrow morning. And then things will slowly warm up. I want to take you to the long-range forecast, but something I'm tracking right now is Hurricane Nicole. This is very late in the season, in the Atlantic hurricane season. First of all, to have a hurricane, let alone a landfalling hurricane. Nicole made landfall a couple of hours ago in the Bahamas and is now tracking towards a landfall near the Kennedy Space Center. Nicole is a much different storm than Hurricane Ian that hit in September, causing devastation to the east coast of Florida. This is a much wider storm, so we'll keep an eye on that. It is expected to make a turn up towards Atlantic Canada, nowhere near as strong as Fiona for this weekend, bringing sort of a more fall-like storm. But again, Nicole making landfall on the east side of Florida in the next couple of hours. Very rare to have a hurricane this late in the season. High pressure is what's keeping that Arctic air locked in for us. I want to show you this double-barreled low-pressure system pausing you Friday morning. So we'll see that increasing cloud tomorrow afternoon, maybe a stray flurry across the south coast. Warmer temperatures for tomorrow night, at least the plus side of 0. But as I pause this Friday morning, notice there is some snow around inland sections. Most of the models having that taper off for Vancouver, and I think that'll change over to rain as our temperatures warm up. So precip for Friday. And then as we head into the weekend, high pressure moves back in. But this is a Pacific high, not our Arctic high. That will bring those frigid temperatures across the prairies. So we're still below seasonal for the weekend, but dry and not as cold. And that's really our story for the long range. We're actually into quite a dry stretch for Metro Vancouver, other than the showers on Friday. Again, slight chance we see those as flurries tomorrow. And Sunday does look like we'll be clipped with a little bit of a Pacific rainmaker. Otherwise, below our seasonal of about 9 for this time of the year and our overnight of about 3. So it's chilly, but Anita, no negatives on there. I'm not saying we won't need the parkas still, you and I, but no negatives.
We definitely need them.
Yeah, we will still need them.
But also that sunshine is really nice.
So. Yeah, I love it clear and crisp.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Well, you may think you're helping the environment when you toss items that are compostable into a green bin, but that might not be the case. Here in BC, any plastic bags, containers, cutlery, and wrap, even those marked biodegradable or compostable, are not allowed in the green bin. As Christine Neese reports, most of those items end up in landfill because municipal processing systems can't handle them.
When you toss a compostable coffee pot or takeout container in a green bin with your food scraps, you probably think it turns into this. Fluffy dark compost destined to nourish crops in a farmer's field. The reality? Most of it ends up here at the landfill, taking much longer to break down than intended and emitting climate-warming methane as it does. Just how many compostable products end up with the trash?
So I would say the majority of compostable packaging products are screened out.
The problem is that accelerated municipal composting facilities like this one just aren't designed to handle it. They were made to process food, leaves, and yard trimmings, which take just days to break down. But compostable packaging, it can take weeks longer, even months. And in Canada, there are no set compostability timelines that makers of these products have to follow.
There's a lot of people out there claiming it, but it doesn't necessarily meet all the standards because there is no real standards yet. So that's the biggest challenge, I think, in the industry.
This is the result. Sorted out with the plastic bags and other things that couldn't break down in time, heaped in big piles to be sent to the landfill. It's a sad reality for businesses that make the harder choice to use sustainable packaging. Most compostables take longer to find and cost more than conventional plastics.
What you're seeing here is a leadership void. I don't care if it's federal, provincial, or local. I don't hear anybody talking about it in a way that is very, passionate or constructive or effective.
Makers of compostables recently had to start reporting what they sell in Ontario. The province wants to know exactly what's in the market and how it's certified as it figures out how to actually compost it. At the federal level, draft regulations on accurately labeling compostables are expected late next year.
There are many hurdles to jump, not just updating technology or creating standards for products, but actually training people to dispose of things properly. It's hard to say when compostable products tossed in Ottawa green bins might end up anywhere other than landfill. Christine East, CBC News, Ottawa.
His nature photography caught the eye of National Geographic and prompted them to call for an 8-page spread on the polar bears of northern Manitoba. We'll introduce you to photographer Martin Gregus next.
Across North America, it's gaining support and opposition. The idea of tying higher education funding to performance in areas like completion rates and graduate salaries. In Manitoba, performance-based funding using similar metrics faces strong pushback. In a letter to government, University of Manitoba's president warned institutions could favor high-performing students at a cost to other priorities such as accessibility. And it may punish the building of programs that address equity and social justice. While Brandon University is worried about graduate wages as a measure for success. Their letter says many of our graduates come from and choose to return to rural communities where wages tend to be lower.
We don't want to be driving away students from post-secondary education. We want increased access.
Scott Forbes leads Manitoba's Faculty Association. He says the evidence against performance-based funding is strong.
What you see under performance-based funding is not real increases in performance, but administrators gaming the system. So they stop taking students who are less likely to graduate in normal 4-year rotations. They start diverting funding away from financial-based supports to more academic scholarships.
Advanced Education Minister John Reyes says the province wants to ensure money is spent wisely. The Auditor General flagged this concern.
We're looking to develop accountability framework metrics that will satisfy everyone involved, and most importantly, for the Manitoba taxpayer.
A Brandon professor says government has yet to establish how the status quo is failing.
This model is not the way in which we feel, that the government can go about improving accountability.
The president of the University College of the North is open to a new funding formula so long as it's flexible.
Our position is that you have to take into account the unique context and circumstance of each institution.
The province says all input will be considered. More consultations are expected into the new year. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Join Gitsan journalist Angela Starrett as she uncovers land theft in Canada in the new CBC British Columbia original podcast, Land Back, out November 15th. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver Inbox and keep connected with us.
We most often see polar bears amid scenes of ice and snow, but the bears also thrive during Arctic summers. A Vancouver photographer spent 2 summers in northern Manitoba with his camera to illustrate how the bears interact and our human impact on them. Simon Goyer from our French service, Radio-Canada, spoke to Martin Gregus.
I'm Martin Gregus. I'm a wildlife photographer and cinematographer of over 19 years now. I like to think, at least, I look at the world from kind of a different perspective, because it was such a rarely documented time of year that everything we were seeing was unique, and it was just really humbling being in their presence and being able to document them. I think living there with the bears just made me so much more humble about life, animals, nature, because they can eat you if they want to. They can come right to your camp, but they choose not to. And you'll learn that level of respect of how can I treat this animal in such a way that they don't feel threatened, and in the same way I don't feel threatened from them. So what you give is exactly what you get back. Even now when people message me commenting on my pictures, commenting on the videos, they say, I can look at this for hours because it makes me so calm. And to me, that just means so much, because that's exactly what we felt when I was with those bears. I just felt calm, you know, and I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that I would sit 15 meters away from a polar bear and feel absolutely calm and have no desire to leave whatsoever and just watch this animal sleep or nurse its cubs or things like that. You learn so much, not just about the animal, but even just about yourself. We really learned that about them, is that they are adapting. It's just we're pushing them to adapt much faster than they are capable of adapting, and I think that's the biggest threat for them. And I mean, I don't want people to look at my pictures and say, here are polar bears in the summertime, they're used to it, they're healthy, they're fat, we don't have to deal with climate change. Absolutely not. Like, it's a real issue, because the Arctic is anything but pristine. We need to change that, and we need to focus on it. And I hope that the calm that people get from those pictures with the polar bears, they're able to take something away from it and are able to form a bond, and in doing so are able to protect them.
So stunning, and just how he got so close to those polar bears, absolutely incredible. I have to agree, the footage is very calming. I can't get over that, and I might have to go back and watch some more of it. So thank you, Martin. That is how we leave you tonight. Thanks for watching CBC Vancouver News, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.